Hello everyone, and welcome to the 281st episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring the characters and themes of Interstellar. If you like my videos, consider signing up to become a patron over on Patreon, where you can get access to my videos ad-free, uncensored, and a day early for just $2 a month. I haven't quite gone to see The Odyssey yet, but considering Christopher Nolan just dropped another film, I figured it might be a good time to head back into his catalog and discuss another film of his. And that being said, if you'd like to see me cover The Odyssey, please let me know down below, and I'll make sure to do so sooner rather than later. Now, Interstellar is a fantastic film, one that had me entranced and emotional throughout its entire runtime. And though there isn't a ton of evil to be had in this story, there's still enough I felt that was more than worth discussing in an episode in this series. And I can't wait to share with all of you what I took from this incredible film, as well as some supplemental information that I found in a book called The Science of Interstellar by Kip Thorne, who was one of the executive producers and science consultant for this film. Some of you may be wondering what happened to the GTA 4 and Animal Farm videos, and the answer to that is they're taking me a little longer than I expected. But you can expect them to be out not too long after the release of this video, just so you're aware. Now, though we don't have to worry about any space-related security concerns, we all still need to be mindful of our own privacy and security here on planet Earth. And that's more true now than it ever was with the internet being such a big part of our lives. And if you want some extra peace of mind while surfing the web, check out our sponsor for this video, Obscura. More often than not, everywhere you go on the internet, any given platform will ask you for your face, your ID, or your phone number just so you can have bare minimum access to their services. And with Australia and 25 US states passing social media and age verification laws, you can expect to hand over more and more of your personal information in the near future. However, all these worries become nearly obsolete with Obscura. Obscura is the world's most private VPN. As while traditional VPNs can see both your identity and the sites you visit when using them, Obscura is a VPN that physically can't link who you are with your internet activity. Its stealth protocol works where other VPNs get blocked, ensuring that you're getting nothing but the best of the best when it comes to securing yourself on the internet wherever you might go. But one of the best things about Obscura, aside from its built-in ad and online tracking blocker, is the fact that it's open source, and any fellow nerds can check their source code and servers for themselves to really see what Obscura is accomplishing behind the scenes. I, for one, was blown away by just how secure Obscura is, and of course how easy it is to use on all my devices, but their transparency is next level, as it's something that a lot of companies in this day and age sorely lack, which I, and I know a lot of you, appreciate. And to make things even better, you don't even need to link a personal email to your account to get Obscura, which is a level of privacy you just can't get anywhere else. So if you want a VPN that not only works phenomenally, but keeps you safe and secure more than any other can, be sure to head over to obscura.com/vile by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on your screen, where you can get 25% off a subscription for only $6 a month. Thank you, Obscura, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Mankind is its own worst enemy and its best friend. Through the efforts of billions of people in both great and small ways, we have become, for better or worse, what we are today. And this idea is central to understanding how the alternate Earth we're shown in this story came to be in such a sorry state. Nearly identical to our own version of Earth, we find that the people here long lived enjoying the many innovations and the comforts that resulted from them that we know today. Though by the time this story begins, the current year is around 2067. We know this because Bromley mentions that the wormhole was first identified by the LIGO facility in California 48 years ago, and in Kip Thorne's The Science of Interstellar, it's stated that this occurred in the year 2019. Now, though there is quite a bit of advanced tech shown to us in this film, most of it seems rather familiar to us, especially on a personal level, and that's because this version of Earth, and its many residents, have been suffering the adverse effects of the dreaded Blight for close to over 30 years now. The Blight is something that's left rather mysterious in the film, and while that's fine considering it's more or less a plot device that's needed to facilitate the events of this story, the rather improbable science behind its creation that was outlined for us in Kip Thorne's aforementioned companion piece to the film is quite interesting. Here Kip recounts a discussion he, Linda Obst, and Jonathan Nolan had with 4 Caltech biologists, Elliot Meyerowitz, Jared Ledbetter, Mel Simon, and David Baltimore, about how the Blight could have manifested. And one particular scenario they discussed, though still highly unlikely to ever occur in the real world, goes a long way in enhancing some of the themes of this story. Here is the conversation they all had regarding a possible scenario that Ledbetter envisioned. Ledbetter: people could panic about global warming. The warming is largely caused by increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. To save us, they might fertilize the Earth's oceans to produce algae that will eat much of the atmosphere's carbon dioxide via photosynthesis. A lot of iron, thrown into the oceans, could do the job. but there might be catastrophic unintended side effects. You might get some new kinds of algae that produce toxins, poison chemicals, not deadly life forms, that poison the oceans. There would be a massive kill-off of fish and plant life. Human civilization depends heavily on the oceans. This could be catastrophic for humans. Is it impossible? Not at all. Experiments have been done where iron was thrown locally into the ocean to produce algae. So much algae that it could be seen from space as green spots. Some of the algae that bloomed were of types never before known to science. We were lucky. The new algae were not noxious, but they might have been. Meyerowitz. Ultraviolet light, streaming through our atmosphere's ozone hole, could mutate your enormous bloom of algae so it creates new pathogens. These pathogens could wipe out plants in the ocean, and then jump to land and start wiping out crops. Baltimore. When faced with catastrophes like these, our only hope for dealing with them is advanced science and technology. If, politically, we don't invest in science and technology, or we hobble them by anti-intellectual ideologies such as denial of evolution, the very source of these catastrophes, we may find ourselves without the solutions we need. And then there is blight, the consequence of many of these scenarios. Blight is a general term for most any disease in a plant that is caused by a pathogen. Baltimore. If you want something to wipe out humanity, there might be no better way than a blight that attacks plants. We are dependent on plants to eat. Yes, we can eat animals or fish instead, but they ate plants. Meyerowitz. It might be sufficient for the blight just to kill off the grasses and nothing else. Grasses are the basis of most of our agriculture. Rice, corn, barley, sorghum, wheat, and most animals that we eat feed on grasses. We already live in a world where 50% of the food grown is destroyed by pathogens, and it's much higher than that in Africa. Fungi, bacteria, viruses, they all can be pathogens. The East Coast used to be covered with chestnut trees. They are no more. They were killed by a blight. The species of banana preferred by most people in the 18th century was wiped out by a blight. The replacement species, the Cavendish banana, today is being threatened by blight. Kip. I thought that blights are specialists that attack only one narrow group of plants and don't jump to others. Ledbetter. There are also generalist blights. There seems to be a trade-off between being a generalist that attacks many species and a specialist that attacks only a few. For the specialist blight, the lethality can be turned up really high. It can knock out, say, 99% of a very specific group of plants. For the generalist, the range of plants attacked is much broader, but its lethality for any plant in that range might be much smaller. That's a pattern we see again and again in nature. Linda. Could you have a generalist blight that becomes much more lethal? Meyerowitz. Something like that has happened before. Early in the Earth's history, when cyanobacteria started making oxygen, thereby changing radically the composition of the Earth's atmosphere, they managed to kill most everything else on Earth. Ledbetter. But the oxygen was a lethal byproduct, a poison produced by the cyanobacteria, not a generalist pathogen. Baltimore. We may not have seen it, but I can imagine a very lethal specialist pathogen becoming a lethal generalist. It could spread the range of plants it attacks with the help of an insect that carries it to many species. A Japanese beetle, for example, which eats something like 200 different plant species, could infect many species with the pathogen it carries, and the pathogen might adapt to attack those species, lethally. Meyerowitz. I can conceive of a totally lethal generalist, a pathogen that attacks chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are something that all plants have in common. They are crucial to photosynthesis, the process where a plant combines sunlight with carbon dioxide from the air and water from its roots to produce carbohydrates that it needs for growth. Without chloroplasts, a plant will die. Now suppose that some new pathogen evolves, for example in the oceans, that attacks chloroplasts. It could wipe out all algae and plant life in the oceans and jump to the land where it wipes out all land plants, so everything becomes a desert. This is possible. I see nothing to prevent it, but it's not very plausible. It is unlikely ever to happen, but it could be a basis for Cooper's world. Now this is all very interesting, but as Kip says at the end of this chapter, these speculations give us a sense of the kinds of nightmare scenarios that could keep a biologist awake at night. In Interstellar, the focus is a lethal generalist blight running rampant over the Earth, but Professor Brand has a secondary worry, humankind running out of oxygen to breathe. And in the next chapter of The Science of Interstellar, Kip goes on to explain how this might happen. Early in Interstellar, Professor Brand says to Cooper, Earth's atmosphere is 80% nitrogen. We don't even breathe nitrogen. Blight does, and as it thrives, our air gets less and less oxygen. The last people to starve will be the first to suffocate, and your daughter's generation will be the last to survive on Earth. This question lies at the interface of two branches of science, biology and geophysics. So I asked the biologists at our Blight dinner, particularly Elliot Meyerowitz, and I asked two geophysicists, Caltech professors Gerald Wasserberg, an expert on the origin and history of the Earth, Moon, and solar system, and Yok Jung, an expert on the physics and chemistry of our Earth's atmosphere and the atmospheres of other planets. From them, and from technical articles they pointed me to, I learned the following. The oxygen we breathe is O2, a molecule made of two oxygen atoms bound together by electrons. There is lots of oxygen on Earth in other forms, carbon dioxide, water minerals in the Earth's crust, to name a few. But our bodies can't use that oxygen until some organism liberates it and converts it to O2. The atmosphere's O2 is destroyed by breathing, burning, and decay. When we breathe in O2, our bodies combine it with carbon to form carbon dioxide, CO2, releasing lots of energy that our bodies use. When wood is burned, the flames rapidly combine the atmosphere's O2 with the wood's carbon to form CO2, which generates the heat that keeps the burning going. When dead plants decay on the forest floor, their carbon is slowly combined with the atmosphere's O2 to form CO2 and heat. The atmosphere's O2 is created primarily by photosynthesis. Chloroplasts in plants use energy from sunlight to split CO2 into C and O2. The O2 is liberated into the Earth's atmosphere, while the plants combine the carbon with hydrogen and oxygen from water to form the carbohydrates that they need for growth. Suppose evolution creates a pathogen that destroys chloroplasts, as speculated by Elliot Meyerowitz at the end of the last chapter. Photosynthesis ends, not all at once, but gradually as plants die out. O2 is no longer being created, but it is still being destroyed by breathing, burning, and decay. Primarily decay, it turns out. Fortunately for the remaining humans, there is not enough decaying plant life on the Earth's surface to swallow up all the O2. Most of the decay will be finished after 30 years, and only about 1% of the O2 will be used up. There is still plenty for Cooper's children and grandchildren to breathe, if they can find anything to eat. But that 1% of the atmospheric O2 will have been converted into carbon dioxide, which means 0.2% of the atmosphere will then be CO2, since most of the atmosphere is nitrogen. That's enough CO2 to make breathing unpleasant for highly sensitive people, and perhaps drive the Earth's temperature up, via the greenhouse effect, by 10 degrees Celsius, 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Unpleasant for everyone, to put it mildly. To make everyone's breathing uncomfortable and induce drowsiness, 10 times more atmospheric O2 would have to be converted into CO2, and to kill most everyone by CO2 poisoning, an additional 5 times more would have to be converted, a factor of 50 in all. I have not found a plausible mechanism for this. So is Professor Brand wrong? Even theoretical physicists can make mistakes, especially theoretical physicists. I know, I am one. Probably yes, he is wrong, but conceivably, no. The professor could be right, but it would require geophysicists' understanding of ocean bottoms to be severely flawed. There's undecayed organic material on the ocean bottoms as well as on land. Geophysicists estimate that the amount on ocean bottoms is about 1/20th that on land. If they are wrong, and there's 50 times more on the ocean bottoms than on land, and if there is a mechanism to quickly dredge it up, then its decay to produce CO2 could leave everyone gasping for oxygen and dying of CO2 poisoning. Now, once every many thousand years, an instability triggers the ocean to turn over. Water from the surface sinks to the bottom and drives bottom water to the surface. It is conceivable that in Cooper's era, there is such an overturn so vigorous that the upwelling bottom water brings with itself most of the ocean bottom's organic material. Suddenly exposed to the atmosphere, this material could decay, converting atmospheric O2 into lethal amounts of CO2. Conceivable, yes, but highly improbable on 2 counts. Highly unlikely that there is 1,000 times more undecayed ocean bottom organic material than geophysicists think, and highly unlikely that a sufficiently vigorous oceanic overturn will occur. Nevertheless, in Interstellar, the Earth is surely dying, and humanity must find a new home. The solar system, aside from Earth, is inhospitable, so the search is on, beyond our solar system. Now, as I said, this is all very interesting, albeit improbable as was outlined for us here, but the blight itself, the havoc it causes, nor the improbability of this even occurring isn't what's pertinent to this analysis. It's the fact that the blight is not some unholy pathogen that sprouted up from nowhere to destroy all life on Earth as we know it, but that it's something that resulted from our own hubris and negligence. We as a species are as good at solving problems as we are at creating them, which is exemplified here by global warming, the rapid increase in global temperatures that has largely come about as a result of our own innovations, like factories, motor vehicles, and large-scale agriculture to name a few. While these shifts in our climate are concerning in our own world, on this version of Earth, things seemed to have gotten so dire that scientists and officials deemed it necessary to implement a quick fix to prevent the world from suffering any more than it already had. But clearly, this endeavor was undertaken with the sentiment of, fix what's broken now, fix what the fix breaks later on in mind. As while we likely never know the particulars of this potential scenario, I think it's fair to assume that whatever potential such a measure had for causing more catastrophe in the future was ignored, like the possibility of the ocean turning over and the potential for far more undecayed organic matter being present on the bottom of the ocean. Now obviously these are things that aren't included in the film, and it's only a possible scenario that could have led to the creation of the Blight. But regardless, I feel that it's something important to take into account when examining this story, as what we learned here significantly enhances its themes, as in taking into account this information, that our own neglectfulness and desire to clean up our own messes regardless of the potential fallout causes all the misery in this story. We find the first evil of Interstellar that occurred even before we meet any of its players, albeit an unintentional one, as it's our own fault that this Blight was created, and it's our fault that the ensuing havoc it wreaked on our planet caused widespread panic that led to resource wars that likely killed billions, especially if such drastic measures as bombing large swaths of the population were taken, like the government tried to convince NASA to do, and the scarcity of said resources that likely killed billions more. A band-aid. That's what this potential scenario was, one that came about as a result of the fact that we often ask ourselves if something will work, but that we only stop to consider what it will take to make something work, and not what we might be breaking as we endeavor to do so. And after hundreds of thousands of years of slapping band-aid after band-aid over the various wounds we've inflicted on ourselves and our world, all the brightest minds left to it have come together and found that there are no more band-aids, no more staunching the many wounds we've inflicted upon our planet. And knowing that it's only a matter of time until it bleeds out, that we must abandon it before it's too late. Perhaps it was possible for us to build structures around our crops capable of keeping the Blight at bay, or moving all the people we could underground, but I imagine these things were considered and concluded to be options that would only be yet more band-aids that could not protect us against the various factors that might render these options pointless. And so Professor Brand, along with Dr. Mann and the rest of their colleagues, created two plans, one that ended up not being possible due to the limits of their knowledge, and another that, while harrowing, would ensure the survival of mankind for generations to come, even if it meant sacrificing all those currently living. Now, while this might seem like the next evil in this story, in truth, Professor Brand and Dr. Mann were probably right in assuming that drastic measures needed to be taken, and that Plan B was the only plan that was going to work, as without the knowledge potentially hidden within black holes, it was impossible for Brand to complete the equation that would have allowed Plan A to work. So unless he was willing to throw the dice and hope that sending a probe or a person into Gargantua would bring back the data he needed to complete it, in the face of such a realization, they were probably right to abandon Plan A and hinge everything on Plan B. As what do you do when we've run out of time, when the clock is ticking down to doomsday and we have no way of stopping it? You either sit by as that clock runs out and do what you can to get by, or you do not go gentle into that good night, as old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage. Rage against the dying of the light. So Brand chose to rage in the only way he could see how, by making sure that we as a species would live on past the expiration date we'd given our planet. And so you might think his colleague, Dr. Mann, came to the same conclusion. And he did, in a sense, but not for the sake of our species, but for himself. Before we ever meet Dr. Mann, we're told that he was the best of the scientists at NASA, a brilliant mind who likely put just as much if not more thought and effort into this plan as Professor Brand did. And while such brilliance and skill cannot be denied, when we finally meet Dr. Mann, we find that he is what he admits himself to be, a coward. When Dr. Mann admits this to Cooper after nearly murdering him, he tells him that he shouldn't judge him because he hasn't been tested like he was tested, that no man has been, and that they couldn't possibly understand why, even with his duty in mind, he chose to press a button that could potentially save his life and doom everyone else. Now that's absolutely true. He was tested, but as he admits to us as well, he never imagined when he set out on this journey that his planet would be one of the ones that wasn't sustainable, never considering the possibility that his life would end by embarking on this mission. And that admission is very important when understanding and judging man's character. For from the very outset, man did not just see a potential for mankind, but a way out for himself, envisioning a bright future away from the fear and dread he felt living on Earth somewhere far across the stars. And because that's true, I believe it's fair to claim that man, while being tested and having to come to terms with the fact that he should send a signal indicating that his cause was lost, failed that test not because of its difficulty, but because of his character. Because he was so afraid to die that he would rather jeopardize the future of humanity than meet the Reaper. Now that's understandable, as none of us want to die, but understanding why someone does something is not an excuse for why they did that thing. And murdering Romilly and abandoning Brandon Cooper to their fates so he might save himself is wrong and cannot be excused. The only leeway we can give Dr. Mann here is acknowledging that because he believed Plan B to be the only way, that he needed the fuel that Cooper was going to use to go home to make his way to another planet such as Edmonds, so he couldn't let Cooper leave. However, he didn't have to lie and try to keep him from leaving by murdering him, as though it would have been a hard conversation to have with these people. Admitting that his planet wasn't viable from the get-go would have in all likelihood caused Brand, Cooper, and Romilly to accept that Plan B was the only way, thus saving his life anyway. But because he was a coward, he was incapable of coming to this realization, and thus took the drastic actions he took in this story to save himself. And in doing so, he didn't even manage to do that, perishing by virtue of his own cowardice and nearly completely dooming Cooper and Brand, and perhaps all of humanity. That's what I love. You know, out there we face great odds, death, but not evil. You don't think nature can be evil? No. Formidable, frightening, but no, not evil. Well, is a lion evil because it rips a gazelle to shreds? Just what we take with us. Is that it? This is a conversation that Cooper and Brand had that perfectly sums up the evil of Dr. Mann. For it was not nature that was evil, nor was he evil himself, but what he took with him. His fear, his despair, his desire to live no matter what. That's what brought him to evil. And where Professor Brand saw the last hope for humanity, Dr. Mann only saw a way out. A chance to save himself from the overwhelming amount of fear he had. Now, while Brand and Mann were correct in assuming that Plan B was the only way, what neither of them could have accounted for is that both humanity's present and its future would be saved by something incalculable: the love we bear for one another. When Cooper saved Brand and chose to fall into Gargantua, he likely did so because he knew she was more qualified to carry out the next steps of this mission. But he also chose to do this because he cared for her. And even if he hadn't known her for very long, the love he bore for an innocent woman who he felt deserved to make it out of this carried him through. Now, once he fell into that black hole, it was love that ultimately saved the remaining humans on Earth. The love a father had for his daughter, and the brilliance that she had that allowed her to take his instructions and cut through the mystery that prevented Plan A from becoming a reality. And when Cooper enters this Tesseract, it's here we learn that the mysterious they who had opened up the wormhole to this other galaxy, and who had been guiding humanity in small ways this entire time, were in fact humans themselves. Humans far off in the future, who had reached a higher dimension and discovered how to make such an impossible feat a reality. But how? Wouldn't the survival of the humans back on Earth be necessary to allow them to exist? And if not that, wouldn't facilitating that survival erase their own existence? Not necessarily. When Brand made it to Edmonds' planet, she began taking the steps to realize Plan B. And because she did, I think we can reliably assume that the humans who built this Tesseract were the descendants of those born from Plan B. But if that's the case, why did they bother to build this Tesseract? If humanity already survived via Plan B, there's no need to save the humans who perished on Earth, right? Yes, that's true. However, sometimes we do needless things for a very important reason. For love. Because Brand was who she was, a noble and kind human being much like Cooper was, she undoubtedly told this new flock of human beings the story behind their creation and their origins on this planet, of the tale of a world ravaged by so many mistakes and a species that was saved by one brave man who was willing to let his life go so many more could live on. This legend of humanity's new beginning, the origin story for this new species of mankind, was the foundation of this new branch of the human species, something as fundamental to their culture as the various myths and legends we cling to now are. And so I imagine in the far future, once they learned how to manipulate space and time and became these higher beings, that legend continued to live on. And the love that our successors had for those that came before them is what spurred them to find a solution that could ensure they could be saved. And since they were incapable of directly affecting events in the past, they used what they could: gravity. And knowing that Cooper was going to fall into that black hole anyway, they chose to make it a place where he could convey to his daughter the knowledge necessary to save their people. But didn't that destroy them in the process? As though in all likelihood Brand would have already begun the process of enacting Plan B by the time the other humans reached her planet. The presence of this new element would have undoubtedly altered the future to the point that these beings' lives would have taken another course, which would have resulted in many of them never existing. So knowing this, why would they still do this? Well, either because, like Cooper, sometimes you make sacrifices for those you love, or, perhaps more likely, because these beings in all likelihood are probably capable of manipulating not just space and time, but timelines as well, which means that they ensure that all the humans who would have died on Earth were saved in every possible timeline, while also ensuring that their own remained intact, which I think is quite plausible. Regardless of what's true here, I think this is one of the greatest beauties of this story, that against all odds, and even after immeasurable amounts of time has passed, love is so strong that it manages to transcend boundaries and limitations we never thought possible. For that is the enduring lesson of Interstellar. Love is not a fundamental aspect of the universe. It's not necessary that we love each other, or that any creature loves another for life to thrive, and for the universe to continue working in the way that it does. Though that's true, it does shape the universe and the way we interact with it and perceive it in ways that can run contrary to logic and nature at times, and that can produce extraordinary results we thought weren't possible, even when the data might point to the contrary, which allows us to defy the natural course of things in so many ways. Sometimes it's a feeling, our intuition that points us to what's right, and sometimes it's our fervent need to protect and preserve those that we love that brings us through any number of problems that may be plaguing us. For though we might slap a band-aid on so many issues we create and hope for the best, when it comes down to it, one of the defining aspects of humanity that separates us from so many other creatures living on our planet is the fact that when we're faced with a storm of fire, rather than running from it, we fight it, for the sake of ourselves, our homes, and the people we love. And though we may struggle to empathize with others beyond our immediate circles at times, in the end, the love for one another that drives us all is ultimately what has made us into who we are, what we are, and what we'll become, for better or for worse. For though there will never be enough time, there will always be time enough to do what we can for the right reasons. Maybe that's corny, maybe that's cheesy, but it's heartwarming all the same. And it's through love, great and small, that we're all made better and insulated from the dark encroachment of evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Interstellar? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, my patrons, anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and especially our Dark Lord patrons, Elijah Kai VA, Mr. Awesome, Louis Dockstater, Just Keeping It Real, Lachlan, Atris Rain, Seltsopa, Him Downstairs, Oh God Why, Beep Boop, Lorenzo Antonino, Eli Livingston, Moondog, and Roberto Hernandez. And a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.